final webinar series from the Recruitment Process Outsourcing Association. My name is Abu Rama. I've been the host of this RPOA webinar program for the past 12 years. My guests are RPO and talent acquisition industry leaders. And in this program, we learn about recruiting trends and best practices from the best and the brightest. I'm delighted to welcome back to the program Trent Cotton, Vice President of Talent and Culture at Hatchworks. Trent will share key highlights from his latest book, High Performance Recruiting. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand on the RPOA website and YouTube after the event. For our live audience, we encourage your active participation. Post your questions to the Q&A and your comments to the Zoom chat. With that, and without further ado, I would like to welcome Trent and turn it over to introduce himself and walk us through his talk.
Thank you so much, Lamise. Glad to be back. You know that you guys are one of my favorites. I think probably one of my favorite conferences last year was definitely the one that we had in Chicago. So really excited today to share the 7 traits, the 7 environments, and the 7 leadership styles that constitute high performance recruiting. It's going to be one of those sessions. So just real quick about me. I am the Vice President of Talent and Culture at Hatchworks. We are a software delivery company. We have employees both in the United States and throughout Latin America. And what we do is we work with clients to build any kind of digital solution, and we're able to help them from ideation all the way to deployment. And we also do some staff augmentation as well. My role is I get the fun part of HR. So I handle everything from the first time we say hello to learning and development, performance coaching, and all of that fun stuff. I have a partner in crime, Kathleen, who works in people operations, who handles a lot of the payroll, the operations, and the benefits. So we work very, very, very closely together, but I always say I have the fun part. Did I major in HR? Absolutely not. I actually majored in business with a minor in statistics and finance, have my master's in business, put myself through school working as a banker. I learned early on, I thought that I wanted to be a psychologist and help people with their problems. I worked for 1 year as a youth minister and realized that was not for me. And somehow I still ended up in HR, where I'm supposed to help people solve problems. Don't really understand how that worked, but the reason I got into HR is because as a sales executive on the finance side, I hated working with HR and I hated working with recruiters especially. But I converted to the dark side in 2004, so 20 years ago. It hurts to say. But I did fall in love with talent acquisition and kind of the learning and development and the performance coaching side. I have written 2 books. We'll talk about the high performance recruiting one today. I wrote Sprint Recruiting in 2021. That is the how of high performance. Of course, I always start backwards. So I started with the how and then wrote a book about the who and the what. And so today we're going to talk about the who and the what. So the problem statement that I was trying to solve for is I do a lot of consulting for recruiting organizations and for our clients as well. And I kept noticing that some teams just performed at a higher level than others in recruiting, but also in sales and some of the other consulting that I do. So it made me really want to dig into the topic and understand why. And I have come to learn through looking at several different aspects within psychology, within different research studies and all of that high performance recruiting teams, they think, they act, and they engage very differently. So going through the book, I started out with I want to talk about the 7 traits. The 7 traits turned into, well, we need to talk about the environments that high performance teams work in the best, and then of course we have to talk about the leaders. So today, I'd like to go through all 3 pillars with you. I am going to warn you, this is not scientific. Did I read a lot of science stuff? Absolutely. But most of this is just from 20 years of working in the industry, also consulting in the industry, and also consulted with a lot of great recruiting leaders that I know and trust, some of them that you would know as well, just to kind of validate and make sure that I was on the right course. So before we start talking about a high performance team, let's look at what mediocrity looks like. In one of the books, I shared that in 2017, I was actually thinking about getting out of recruiting because I felt like I was running a daycare and there is chaos. No one's moving in the same direction. As a leader, I was spending more time refereeing spats between recruiters complaining about hiring managers complaining about recruiters, than I was actually developing and executing on a strategy. Also, the favorite word is no. In HR, I think that's kind of a requirement, or at least it was 20 years ago whenever I got into HR. You have to be good at saying no. On high performance teams, they like to find ways around things. Mediocre teams, they say no to innovation, they say no to anything new, they say no to feedback, and they say no to anything because they don't want to challenge the status quo. And then finally, there's a lack of accountability. No one takes ownership for what they do. There's a lot of finger pointing, and the culture is the game of blame. And if you think about just these three, I could probably list three or four more, but those are just not a very fun environment. But unfortunately, a lot of recruiting organizations, especially now, where there's been so many different layoffs and so many recruiters in the market, a lot of mediocre teams, they just kind of want to keep the status quo. One, for safety. Two, is because they don't necessarily have the aspirations to move into a high performance team. But if we look at the effects of high performance recruiting on an organization, there's a lot of benefits there. The first one is, 30% increase in operational growth rate. There's a 60% improvement in employer brand, a 50%, that's crazy, a 50% increase in the quality of hire, which leads to a 25% increase in employee retention. So if you're looking at this, it's like, why in the world would I not want to lead a high performance recruiting organization? So there are 7 traits, and we're going to go through them one by one. I'll try to throw in a couple of funny stories where I can, just with my own personal experience. But going through them, here are the 7. The intellectually curious, adaptable, goal-oriented, bursty communication, grit, accountability, and respectful conflict. So let's dig into each one of these. And I'm going to start with the one I get the most questions about. I can't tell you how many people have read the book and they go, "What is bursty communications?" whenever they see um, the title page. But high performance recruiters, they appreciate efficiency and brevity. So they get in and get out. If you've got like a team group chat, they will be the ones that they're almost like flies. They come in, they buzz around, they get their answer, and they go right back to work. And some of the others in the chat are going, where did Lamise go? Why? I thought she was talking to us. And nope, Lamise is moving on to the next task because that's how her brain works. They're focused so much on getting the task done. Communication is all around accomplishing that task. Anything else is just superfluous for them, and it has no value. So do not expect them to sit in a 2-hour meeting and be fully engaged. It's just not possible. The reason that in sprint recruiting that the daily stand-ups work so well is because it allows leaders to create this bursty communication environment. It's the same agenda every day. What have you done in the last 24 hours? What are your commitments in the next 24 hours? What obstacles are you running into? And how can I help you? Or where do you need help? It's the same agenda every day. So high-performing recruiters, they love that. They get in, provide their update, and then they're able to leave in 15 or 30 minutes. As a high-performance leader, it's also good because at the end of that 30 minutes, I know everything that's going on in the organization, and I've got my task list, which is, what are the obstacles that I need to blow out of the way for my high performance recruiting team to remain high performing? Next, we have respectful conflict. If you've ever been in let me give an example. There was one recruiting organization I was working with, and they were like, there's a problem, but we just don't know what it is. We just want someone to kind of come in and help us figure it out. So I sat in on 3 of their meetings, and it was very much like church. You had one person that spoke and everyone that said amen, and then everybody left. And maybe I'm just weird. I'm not used to that. I'm used to respectful conflict where there is some passionate debate going on because everyone on a high performance team, They're incredibly involved in their work from an intrinsic value. They value the relationship they have with their candidates. They value their relationship and the commitment that they have to the organization and to the hiring manager. So whenever you bring up a topic, they're going to come at it with passion. Sometimes, unfortunately, this is read as aggression, and that's not the case. You may notice someone's inflection of their voice may change. They may become a lot more expressive with their hands or become a very, very verbose. Again, that's not them being aggressive. It's just all that passion coming out in whatever way, whether it's the hand gestures or their voice. What you want to do is you want to be able to enable that among the team and provide that safe space. Some of the best ideas come out of the most passionate debates. So if you don't have that and you have what I call boring meetings, then chances are you're kind of leaning more toward that mediocrity. So you want to create that environment where it's okay and you encourage that respectful conflict. Intellectually curious recruiters are some of my favorite. Whenever I'm interviewing a recruiter and they're questioning me on the process, and I'm thinking to myself, why do we do that way? It's almost a pretty clear indicator I'm going to hire that individual. I love working with intellectually curious recruiters, maybe because I consider myself to be intellectually curious. Growing up, I was called the Riddler because I always asked why. You'll notice that people who are intellectually curious will never take something at face value. And it can be annoying. It could be almost like, I know when my daughter was 3, it was like, hey, baby, go do this. Why? Just because I said so, But you can't do that on high performance teams. You got to be able to nurture that and let that go through. And the benefit of that is that intellectually curious recruiters, they go about their search strategy completely different than normal recruiters. They will do a very, very in-depth intake call and be able to understand the ins and the outs of that job like no one else. And then from there, they build this search strategy that goes and finds the top talent, maybe not necessarily the fastest, but the most efficient way. I had a recruiter that I hired whenever I worked for the bank, and she was going to kind of take over the engineering recruiting, which tech was a weakness for me in recruiting, which is ironically now that I work for a tech company. But she was very intellectually curious, and I loved hearing her updates, and especially in our one-on-ones, because there would be these most minute, challenging types of roles, and she would just somehow pull a candidate out of her hat. And I remember one particular one, we were going through it on the intake, and she was asking a lot of questions, and she was technical. I didn't know what either one of them were talking about. I was just there to look pretty on the call, but she was really digging into, okay, was it going to do this or that? 45 days later, she says, hey, I got that position filled. Really? Where'd you find it? In a forum. I said, hold on. You found him in a forum? She goes, yeah, I was asking the manager, like, where could I read up more information? And he gave me 2 of these forums, and I noticed this one person was answering a lot of questions. So I reached out to him, and that's who we're hiring. I never would have thought about that. Never. It never would have crossed my mind. But because she was intellectually curious, it came as a byproduct of that. So if you've got someone on your team that asks a lot of questions, nurture it. It can be a little overwhelming. Trust me, sometimes I just want to go, just do what I ask, please. But I recognize it and I nurture it because the organization win, your candidates win, and you have a fantastic member of the team. So the next one is goal oriented. This sounds like duh. I really should have changed it to goal obsessed. So funny story. My husband and I were going to meet some friends at a place in Atlanta I'd never been. So I, of course, mapped it out. And about halfway during the trip, he stopped and he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You have run 3 red lights. You've cut 3 people off." He goes, "And you're going 45 and a 30, down Midtown." And what I was able to realize is that the map said that I would get there at 2:25, and I was racing the map. It's just like how brains work who are goal obsessed. Goal obsessed recruiters are in it for the kill. They love the hunt. Once the candidate says I do, they're probably going to be like, all right, great, fantastic, I'm done. They're going to move on to the next one because they need that dopamine hit. And the goal is the minimum. So if you say 100, just understand for them, success only comes at 125 and above. And even whenever there's not a competition, they're going to create one internally, not because it's toxic, it's not a toxic trait, it's where they get their motivation. It's how they're able to plan out their day. So if they know that if they need to get through 50 candidates in order to get to that one hire and they've got to get it done in 7 days, they're going to break that goal down almost to the hour. And they'll be obsessed with making sure that everything lines up to hit that goal. They also have an incessant need to know where they stand personally, but also against their team. I was consulting with one leader who said that they were complaining about one of their team members who was constantly going, well, where am I? Out of the 10, am I the top producer, the middle producer, the lowest producer, or what? And the leader was complaining to me. And, once we were able to kind of go through this particular theme, they understood that that person wanted to understand who the top performers were. So that way she could go and learn from them. And that's something as a leader that you always want to encourage. The next is grit or tenacity. Tenacious recruiters will not accept no. They view failure as an opportunity to learn. They almost move fast so that way they can fail and begin the learning process. And they also reframe obstacles into opportunities, or how can I prove them wrong? And one of my favorite stories was a recruiter that I was sitting on the call with them and our COO, and they were working on a project, and the COO said, how long do you think it'll take for this to get done? And she says, I think we can get it done in about 90 days or less. He goes, there's no way in the world that you'll be able to get that done. And I remember putting my head in my hands going, oh God, he has no idea what in the world he just did, because I knew that she was going to kill herself to prove him wrong. And she did. She did it. She wanted to do it in 45 days. She did it in 48 days. But that tenacious and that grit, it was driven by the opportunity to say, look, I need you to believe in me. I want you to believe in me. So recruiters with that grit, you give them a hard job, they're going to want to get it filled. One, because it is a success for the organization. Two, because they want to please their client. And three, they want to please you. So if you find someone that's got that grit, make sure that you get them on your team. Now, the negative side of that is that sometimes they just can't let things go. And you have to help them with that because they feel like something beat them. And sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes jobs just close, or sometimes the manager just hires the person that they go golfing with, and it's nothing on the recruiter. So you do need to spend some time with them, nurturing that and kind of licking their wounds, but helping them move on. Accountability. We talked about a lack of accountability as a sign of a mediocre team. So of course, accountability is where everyone in the organization is held at the same level. And the reason that it is so important in recruiting is that in normal organizations, hiring managers and recruiters are constantly doing this because there's no accountability. Usually what I find is it's always on the recruiter. The recruiter has to do everything. The manager cannot give feedback for 4 years, and that's okay. It's still the recruiter's fault for not getting the role filled. So creating that balance, and that's one of the reasons why there's a 48-hour feedback loop in sprint recruiting, is it creates that accountability to where the recruiter and the hiring manager are partners. They're hiring partners. And this increases trust throughout the organization, but most especially on high performance teams. I find that whenever they have that level of accountability, they know that the person to their left and to their right is going to do at or more than they will to accomplish the same goal. And all that does is it's kind of like that old saying, a high tide raises all ships. It's exactly why this particular theme is so important on high performance teams. And then finally, we have adaptability. They love trying something new. Chances are, if you have a large team, they're the ones that tried ChatGPT first. They're the ones that are out there like, hey, did you see this? Hey, have you seen that? And they're sharing it with the group. They get energy out of trying something new. They're always looking for some innovative way of accomplishing their task. And change is really not an obstacle. It's an opportunity to learn something different or try something new. And for me, whenever I come across, I call it the trifecta. Whenever I'm interviewing a recruiter and I can see that they are intellectually curious, they're adaptable, and they have grit, slam dunk. I've actually hired someone on the phone first interview because they had all three of those. Why? Because I understand that if, regardless of the role or the most complicated hiring manager that I give them, I know that they're going to be adaptable. They're going to change their personality and their way of doing things in order to connect with that hiring manager. They're going to be intellectually curious enough to really understand that complicated role and come up with a really unique and innovative search strategy. And they're going to have the grit to get it done. So if I've been asked a couple of times, what do you look for someone that has all 7 traits? No, but I definitely look for those 3. Those are my 3 favorite. So let's shift and let's talk, we've got the 7 traits. We know what high performance recruiters, what qualities that they have. What are the environments that they need in order to really flourish? And there's 7 of those. Cognitive diversity. They want agile workplaces and processes. They want small tactical teams. They think like a hive, like a beehive. They are driven by purpose, not just accomplishing the task, but how does that task relate to a larger purpose in the organization and in their communities, flow state, and the playground. So just for the interest of time, I kind of chose 3 of my favorites. The first one is a playground. So if you think back to whenever you were in school, all of us look forward to what? Recess. You were outside of the classroom. And I remember going back to my daughter's school, and I looked and saw monkey bars, and I saw a swing set. I saw, the tires that they would always bury in the dirt. That way you could climb over them. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But I took myself back to grade school, where those monkey bars were my only way over that the volcano that I was trying to escape and get from an enemy. That swing was a spaceship that was taking me into another dimension. And that's why I like the playground, is because it encourages innovation. It encourages ideation without rules. And I think a lot of times whenever organizations get tripped up, it's how can we accomplish something in the box? The playground says there is no box. What do we need to do? That's the first and major priority. But then, of course, you do have to get tactical and say, okay, what's realistic? What can we actually get done? And then back into it that way. But having that playground for high performance teams, it's actually fun to watch. It's fun to watch their minds kind of it's like the gears start going and they start playing off of each other, and there's a palpable energy in the room whenever you give them the playground. Small tactical teams is very important. If you think about SWAT teams or SEAL teams, they always do it in 5 to 7 people. Why? It gives you flexibility. That team is also very, very, very close knit. So they're going to be able to, there's going to be that trust and that accountability between them at a totally different degree on a 5 to 7 member team versus I'm part of 50. The other thing that I like about small tactical teams is they self-organize. So, at the bank, I had 50 some odd recruiters, and they were all in pods or small tactical teams. And what I loved is, as a leader, I would go in to try and solve a problem for them, but they kind of worked among themselves and solved the problem in a way that I never would have thought about. And it was a lot more effective because they were the ones that were closest to the client. So if you've got this large, massive team, break it into a couple of smaller, different teams. Leverage that ability for your recruiters, especially the high performers. They're going to naturally self-organize and embrace that, encourage that, and give them the air cover to be able to do it. Flow state. I could talk for an hour about flow state. I love this mental state. I'm a musician, and there have been times whenever I have played music and I wasn't looking at the sheet. I wasn't reading the notes that were on the page. I was vibing on the kind of the feeling of the song. It's hard to describe as a musician, but it's like everything just kind of centers. And that's what flow state is. If you've ever been working on something and you just lose track of time and you're hyper focused on it, and maybe some of the greatest ideas come out of this particular state, it's scientific. There's a whole thing. If you just go on YouTube. I think his name's Dorian. He talks a lot about flow state and the chemical processes that go on in the brain. So if you're a nerd like me, go check it out. It's really, really cool. But what you want to do is you want to encourage and provide an opportunity and a safe space for your recruiters to actually have deep thinking time. Deep thinking about how they can fill this particular job with a different search strategy. They can go and research what are some other tools that we should be using and leveraging to make us a better recruiting organization. If you don't provide them that space to be able to think, they're going to continue to just burn themselves out. So I could talk about all the others. Hive mentality is another one of my favorites, but definitely encourage you to go get the book, and I go through all of them in pretty great detail. So let's shift in. Now we're going to talk about the leaders. Lamese, how am I doing on time? Am I good? Okay. All right, so the 7 leadership styles are the coach, doctor, shepherd, negotiator, scientist, change agent, and navigator. Whenever I was writing this, I was thinking there's got to be an easy way that I can put this in a way that if I were a new leader, I could kind of look at it and go, okay, this is why I need to be the coach versus the doctor. And I don't know if it was luck or genius. It was probably more luck, but I decided let me kind of chart this out. So I created what is called the leadership matrix. So you've got the team health, which describes, how your team is responding. Are they stressed or are they engaged? However you want to define team health is kind of up to you and your particular team and in your organization. The same is with conflict. You have low to high. So internal stress, conflict with hiring managers, market changes and compression. Conflict could also be your recruiting team was 25 and now you're 12 and the workloads have doubled. However you want to explain that conflict is on the x-axis. So if you start looking, if we are dealing with low conflict and high team health, you need to be a shepherd. And what do shepherds do? They guide the flock. They make sure that they are developed. They make sure that they are getting their right nutrition, and they're kind of keeping them on the right path. That's all they need to do, but they're self-organized. Everything's okay. The doctor is whenever there's low team health and low conflict. And I've been asked a couple of times, why wouldn't you have the doctor in high conflict? My preference, whenever I'm using the doctor, is that I want to get ahead of it. I don't want to be in the thick of the battle trying to patch up people. I want to patch them up before that battle intensifies. So, if your team is just beaten down for one reason or another, take that doctor approach and ask a lot of questions. Don't try to necessarily solve their problems, but help them understand how to go and find that solution themselves and check in on them regularly. I like to do health checks, if and it could just be something in like a group chat. If I haven't heard anything from the team, I'm like, you guys alive? What's going on? What's your favorite movie? Just some kind of a health check. So that way I can make sure that they don't feel isolated in the virtual environment. I think that many of us are used to being around people and we kind of like working from home because of the convenience, but there is something lonely, especially in recruiters, whenever you're beaten constantly by your hiring managers, by the market and all of that. Sometimes as a leader, you need to be that doctor and help them find the road to a healthy lifestyle. Moving into high conflict and low team health, you need to be the navigator. So if you think about navigating, think about Winston Churchill. He was leading the UK during World War II. He was very good about communicating in a very transparent and direct way about what was going on. And if you think back then, they didn't have iPhones, they didn't have Twitter and all this other stuff. It was just the radio. And he was their voice of strength and their voice of reality. And that's what the navigator does in very high conflict whenever the team health is low. They come in and help navigate towards some type of a solution. And they do it in a very direct but diplomatic way. They're very stoic. Scientists, on the other hand, they go to the data. I am very much a scientist. Whenever conflict gets high, I'm going to go to the data and say, what is the data telling me? I'm not listening to anybody else. I want to hear what the data is telling me. And there's some need for that sometimes. Sometimes I think I should be more of a navigator than a scientist, but that's just where I feel the most comfortable. But they leverage the data to be able to de-escalate the conflict That way they can then shift into more of a doctor mode and take care of their team and get them back to where the team health is high. In the high intensity and high team health, they need a change agent. They need someone that's going to come in and help them look at the battle in a different way. Here's a different solution. Have we tried this tactic? And then the negotiator is also going to be able to help referee, I guess is the best word. Usually whenever I'm a negotiator, I've got a recruiter that is about to jump off the ledge and a hiring manager that's about to push them. So I'm trying to negotiate the both of them down. So, you know, having that, whether you're a change agent or a negotiator, to me, I kind of jump between the two. So I'm trying to negotiate something to get everybody to calm down, but I'm also trying to inspire them to look at how do we solve this problem or resolve this conflict in a more innovative way. So that's kind of the matrix. And of course, the coach sits in the middle of that, because there are times where the coach to me embodies all of them all at once. And you need to be able to understand what motivates your team and when to push and when not to push. So as an example, I work out a lot with my husband. He knows when to push me. He knows whenever I'm just physically tired and I can't do another rep, and he knows whenever I'm just lazy. And he pushes whenever I'm lazy, and he encourages me to rest whenever I'm tired. And that's what the coach does. I use the example, and I am not a sports person. If any of you have heard me talk, you know that I have no cognition of how most sports work. But I do have a lot of respect for Nick Saban. I've read a lot about him. He knows how to put together a team, and he knows what motivates them, and he instills trust and demands respect from them. And to me, whenever I think about a coach and some of the best coaches that I've worked for, they knew when to push me. They knew whenever I was getting outside of my comfort zone and I was like, hey, I can't do this anymore. And they pushed me and inspired me to innovate and to grow. All right. So what next? All right, we're going over the 7 traits, we're going over the 7 environments, going over the 7 leadership styles. What do? Here are just some tactical approaches to get it done, or just some things to kind of think through as far as next steps. So for the traits, interview process is critical. I gave several examples of, whenever I'm interviewing, I hear certain things, I'm like, oh, they're adaptable. Oh, they have grit or tenacity. And I'd look for those, and I hire on the team wherever my gap is. So if I need a little bit more adaptability on the team, I'm going to weight that a little bit more. So it's really going to be dependent on what you need for your organization, for the types of roles that you recruit for, and for your recruiting group, where are the gaps? Also, take some time and maybe go over this with your team and find out where their strengths are and play to their strengths. Don't try to manage their weaknesses. So if someone has a lot of grit and they're just not adaptable, you're not going to change that. It's just the way that they're wired. You're going to have to find a way to really kind of excel that strength of their grit and play it as a strength to overcompensate for the weakness. And then also to try to find some ways. There are some times where people just don't want to be adaptable because they're just in the mood. That's where you coach them. The aptitude and the ability is there. They just, maybe for one reason or another, just don't feel like being it. That's where you need to coach and develop them. So that's on the traits. On the environments, discuss with your team, where do they feel the most valued? Where do they get the most energy from? How can you transform your organization to be an organization that they want to stay at, that they look forward to going to work, regardless of the wars that we sometimes have to fight in recruiting? There's still this environment that I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to fight a battle, I want it to be with the people that on this team and in this particular environment. And then train your team on the different environments and solicit feedback from them. Get some ideas from them of how can you create a playground? How can you operate more like a hive mentality? From a leadership, it's use the matrix the next time that you're doing a coaching. Just do a quick evaluation. That's the reason I like it. It's very simple. Is how's this person feeling? And what's going on conflict-wise? Is it low or high? And then I know which particular leadership style I need to make sure that I'm holding myself accountable to. And then be okay with switching leadership styles according to the situation and the individual. For some of my team members, if I were to go in as a scientist, it would not register with them. They're not data people. So I have to either be the navigator or the coach. So make sure that you have some adaptability, for the lack of a better term, adaptability and being able to switch those leadership styles. And if you're managing other leaders, I would strongly encourage you to at least go over that leadership matrix with them and explain, and then talk about different scenarios whenever they've used the doctor versus the shepherd or the navigator versus the scientist. And then other, shameless plug, go buy the book. Share your feedback and stories. You can instant message me. I'll provide all of my contact information. And then, of course, if you're looking for any kind of help or consultation or coaching, I'm definitely available for that as well. So with that, I will turn it over and answer any kind of questions that have been thrown out there. I hope I'm doing good on time. 37 minutes. I told you 42.
Well, fascinating stuff. So definitely worth the extra time. And we have an intellectually curious audience.
Oh, great.
We've got some questions. Yes. The first question, when you were referencing the intellectual curiosity and the questions that are is good trait of these recruiters, the question from Vanessa, is it fair to say that some people get too deep in the weeds?
Yes. Yes, that's a fantastic question. So with each of the positive aspects of the traits, there's a negative that you have to coach around or develop, and you hit the weakness of intellectually curious. They will gag. There's a proverb that says, "Gag in a gnat and swallow a camel." Sometimes that's what they do. They major in the minors. But what I have found is that those that are naturally intellectually curious, if you call them out going, "Hey, you're getting into the weeds," and you divert them back and maybe appeal to their goal orientation, that's a way to kind of shift gears for them, because then they're going to go, "Oh, well, if I spend any more time on this, I'm wasting time not developing my search strategy or reaching out or sourcing." It's a great way to kind of redirect them. And that's why I like the 7 traits, is because there are certain times whenever someone's being too tenacious, I can appeal to that goal orientation aspect of them and shift them out of it. Great question, though.
Yes, and another good question. How do you foster and encourage these traits, but also keep your team from burning out?
Oh, that's where the environments come in. And that's why it's so critical to make sure that you understand from your team which environments appeals to them the most. So sometimes whenever, I'll just give a couple examples. At a previous organization, whenever I joined, there were 4 recruiters. The team probably should have been about the size of 12, and they were beat down. I would have like one-on-ones with them in the very beginning just to get to know them a little bit, and it was exhausting. I would usually get off the one-on-one depressed. So what I was able to do is shift back into, okay, who has what strength, and how do I leverage that strength to inspire them, to motivate them, to encourage them, to love on them. You can almost think about these 7 traits as kind of like love languages as well for your recruiters. So I would encourage you to find out what trait best identifies that particular individual on your team who's suffering burnout, and then play to that as a strength as well.
On the topic of environment, the next question, Trent, is what's your advice on having a playground for a team that is 100% remote?
There's so many tools out there that you can use. There's Miro boards, there's Confluence, there's just throwing open a shared doc, or I think even Teams has got like a whiteboard. I know Slack has got a whiteboard in there. So use those types of environments or those kind of tools to be able to create that playground. Because what you want to do in a playground is start with an idea, and it's that improv, that yes and. I want to do this, and then you'll have a team member that comes and says, "Oh yeah, if we did that, then we can do this over here." And you want to be able to capture it. And I find that being able to have some way to visualize that inspires so much more energy and ideation, and you start to see those boundaries of what can be done or what should be done. They start to kind of fade away, because that energy and that passion that comes around the playground just takes a life of its own. Now, the flip side of that is that sometimes you have to pull them back. It's going, okay, we've been ideating for an hour. It's time that we get tactical. Like, what do we want to get done? That's a fantastic problem to have. I'd rather manage to that and say, let's save some of these ideas for our next playground session, which is always a great way to make sure that they join the next one and just know that they're going to come with even more ideas because they've had some time to think through it.
Trent, the last question I will ask is not as much about the traits, but more about Trent, maybe. And I don't know what are you using the TikTok account for? It's on your slide.
Well, TikTok, TikTok is kind of where I have different levels of my personality. Let me, as you know, I can be pretty raw. So TikTok is where I'm raw. I'm like, this stupid. And no, I'm just kidding. I give a lot of practical advice on TikTok for job seekers, for recruiters, for leaders. And sometimes I'll take down some of these big content and break them into bite-sized pieces. Just something that, because I know for me, if I'm on the treadmill or if I'm waiting on dinner to be to finish getting done, I'll get on TikTok just to release my brain. But I found flow state from TikTok. Like, it was just a quick little thing. I was like, oh, no, I need more. I need more of this. And so I'm just kind of hoping that, getting that kind of content out there, especially for recruiters. Recruiters, we've been beat up since 2020. And I just want to provide as much encouragement and ideas for how to reinvent themselves as I can. So TikTok is where I go for that. Also do it a little bit on Instagram and also do it on YouTube. I forgot to put my YouTube on there, but it's YouTube is at High Performance Recruiting. I'll go through and show you like how to build a chat GPT and a couple of other things. So there's long and short form content on both.
Fantastic. And for the sake of time, excellent conversation, excellent discussion. Trent, love the book. Thank you all for a very engaging and interactive session. Appreciate your time. Thank you again, Trent, and hope to see you at a future at RPA webinar.
I hope so. Thank you.